Hey, everybody. This is our weekly lecture. It's a beautiful sunny day in Las Vegas, live from Las Vegas, AAE 790 studio for final year Master of Architecture students. But of course, it's a public event and it is recorded for our YouTube channel. I welcome Marije, who is speaking from Suriname today. And Oliver, who's speaking from San Jose in Costa Rica. So both in Central America, but different places. And we are here in the US, of course. So fantastic to have you with us. Thank you so much for doing this, for coming online. We are intrigued by the zero footprint, no footprint house, or whatever the name of it is. You're going to tell us more about it. How can a house have no footprint? So we want to learn all about it, and I know you're gonna have a sharing mode, half-half. You are a team. A01 is a company and the foundation, and also a couple in private life, we should tell. And so in the nutshell, A01 is an interdisciplinary network organization with more than 15 years of experience. And the work of A01 is a methodology is designed to break the boundaries of a single one profession to allow for a holistic approach, we like that shapes our architecture, your architecture rather, and we envision a long-term impact that promises economic growth, a responsible usage of natural resources, and equal social development and high-quality spatial surrounding, reading from your website and from your statement. So we are very happy to have you here. And if it's okay, we hear you 50 minutes or something, as long as you like. And then we have Q&A, and everybody who's online, please put your questions in the chat box. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Great, Stefan. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. I am in Costa Rica, as you said, and Marije is over there in Suriname. So we split this into two parts. Marije is going to do the first part. I'm going to do the second part and tell you all about the no footprint house. And I would say, let's jump right in it. Thanks so much for having us. And Marije, give it a go.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for your dynamic introduction, and Oliver as well. Yeah, learning from Costa Rica, we call this, because we're going to show mostly projects that we're doing in Costa Rica, although we work also in other countries all over the world, not only in Latin America, but also in Africa, Europe, Asia. So. Yeah, as Stefan already said, we're a multidisciplinary, a multidisciplinary network organization. We have a more commercial part, which is called a company, and a nonprofit part, which is a foundation, mostly also to work on topics which which we think are important, but maybe there's not a clear client who would contract to generate new knowledge and also publish that, share that with a broader public. So for that, we created a foundation to also be able to actually coin new topics in areas where there's not much knowledge about it yet. And we work on urban and rural development and everything that is between and around that, because we often speak of the urban hybrids, because the boundaries are blurring more and more, and creating more complex situation. It's not so black and white what is urban or rural. And we can see that also when we look at the center of San Jose in the year 1900, which we are doing over here. It's the center of the capital of Costa Rica, 123 years ago. And this is how it looked in the year 2000, 100 years later. Of course, we're 25 kilometers more to the outside, but we look here to the center of San Jose, and it has started to grow outward in this unplanned, uncontrolled suburban sprawl, and actually combined or met other cities that were around and created this big urban stain, you could say, in the Central Valley. And that it's actually quite an extensive territory of 1,800 square kilometers, and 3 million people live here, which is 60% of the national population. So when looking at this uncontrolled suburban sprawl, we actually also came up to this quote of Kai Vöckler, a colleague urbanist. This was in 2006, where he said, "Spatial transformations have produced a new kind of city for which we have as yet no adequate models of perception and representation." Well, and Oliver being an architect and myself being an anthropologist, of course, we started talking about, well, what could these models of perception and representation be? So we started investigating this in the greater metropolitan area, which is that sprawled city that we saw before. So it's San Jose together with 3 surrounding cities, metropolitan cities as they're called. And we started investigating that with the Latin American faculty for social science. This is one of the publications that we made out of that research. And it's called Urban Development. And it's actually a study of the urban development and culture of the greater metropolitan area of Costa Rica. For this study, we developed a new methodology, which we call social cultural mapping. And it's basically, we go into urban territories and we talk with the people, we make photos, we make observations, we draw that on a map, on a satellite photo of the area that we are visiting. And with that, we're creating this cognitive image, an image which here you can clearly see it shows this urban, actually, airdrop urbanism of different urban life worlds, which are close together but clearly separate, where a golf course community on the left side of the image is even the same size. It's a gated community around the golf course, and it's practically the same size as the original urban center of this little town, where which you see in the gray spot in the center of the image. And there it's clearly separated also from the industrial areas and from office centers. And you also see clearly the rivers surrounding it, which basically, and often we've seen that in the case of the greater metropolitan areas, that the rivers are viewed as borders. That's why we put crosses there. It's really seen as that is the border of the town, instead of looking at it as a potential high quality urban space. There's issues of insecurity in the orange square with the lock. There's issues of there's also positive issues like nice smells that you have in near restaurants, etc. So with all of this, we created what we call a family of icons, and these icons, they represent both perception and behavior. So when we talk about perception, the way people view the world, and we combine it with behavior, attitudes, how people use the area, the surrounding, the urban space, how they behave towards each other, we're practically talking about culture, and that is why we focused on these 2 aspects, and we split it up in this family of icons. This suburban sprawl you also see clearly here in this satellite photo, where on the left center of the photo you see the space, the typical Spanish colonial grid, very from streets from north to south and avenues from east to west, and then surrounded with a ring road, and further out of that ring road, it becomes very organic because people have started to build around the big arteries, and this is clearly an unplanned suburban growth. We analyzed also this model of a city, we call it a city, the greater metropolitan area, but of course it's 4 cities combined. Actually, it's 31 because there's 31 municipalities in it. But we started comparing this also with other typical cities, both that are cities that are known for their widespread, as Los Angeles, which is actually only 2/3 of the territory of the greater metropolitan area, but it has 2.5 times the amount of population per square kilometer. And we also compared it with other models like Manhattan, which is even 20 times or more the number of people per square kilometer on a much smaller footprint. And but of course, Manhattan depends a lot on the outside for example, agricultural production, which in the case of the greater metropolitan area, although it's called metropolitan area, there's a lot of agricultural areas as well. So it's this urban hybrid, as I also said at the beginning. We also analyzed ways of how we can people can then move between the 31 different municipalities, 31 different towns, and the bigger centers of San Jose, Alajuela, Heredia, and Cartago, the 4 metropolitan areas, through motorized transport, but preferably collective motorized transport like buses, and even better the train, which actually at the moment that we were doing this investigation was also reinstated in this area. Before that there was no train traffic, and now there is, but it's still quite limited. It's not near what we are used to in our countries of origin in Germany and the Netherlands. And we analyzed also, okay, but how could these centers, these city centers look? How could we make that more sustainable by creating a multifunctional, compact urban center where people don't only live and then take their car to drive to the center of San Jose to work or to go to the university or to do shopping. No, how can we create these functions within the limits of the city centers, and also use green arteries to mobilize ourselves and move from one place to another by foot or by bike, using non-motorized transport, means of transport. Another analysis we did, and all these analysis we did with different with the University of Architecture in Costa Rica. So we looked at all these kind of concepts and models together with a group of architecture students. And here we see this and also an analysis of different urban acupunctures and the densities that could be created, and how this could look in one of the centers of San Jose, the central districts of San Jose. Here's an image of the same area where we also look at what is also called the Trama Verde, looking how to connect different green spaces within the city through other green arteries, often rivers. There's 870 kilometers of rivers only in San Jose. But also through streets which have a lot of trees. And these green arteries, they're not only interesting for moving from A to B, or for recreational purposes or sports, but can also be used for commerce and for institutional or even production of food, for example. And we made an actual project for this as well in the city of Ciudad Colón. That's where we are living. And we work together with the communities that are bordering a river, which is called Pacaqua River. And through a participatory design process where we included all different sectors of the population. So we really had various sessions where everybody could also indicate what they would like to have in this urban river park. And then we did a process of prioritization to see also, okay, yeah, there's a lot of ideas, but we cannot do everything. So we had them decide on what to do, what would be prioritized in the first phase. And so they come up with all these kind of elements, which you also see here in the visualizations that we made of the final proposal, which include art in public areas, green walls, shaded areas to sit or to even give environmental education, possible mobilization by bike and by foot. We also looked at the river, of course, because as I said, there's only in San Jose 870 kilometers of river, but they're mostly very polluted. So we also looked on what to do with the solid and liquid waste, and through physical nettings, but also use of different plants to clean the waters. And these are, of course, high quality urban spaces where you could enjoy nature and even meditate. This urban river park is also interesting in the sense that it would connect the urban center of Ciudad Colón to these different communities that are located around the park, and also to an industrial zone, which you see here in the north, where there's also a health clinic or a small hospital, and also the main road to the city center of San Jose. So this is a combination of what we call the hardware, the physical infrastructure, and at the same time the software, because in order to create these kind of river park, for example, you need to create a new urban culture. People need to put or they need to see that these rivers are high quality spaces, and otherwise they will keep on contaminating them. So it really needs, you cannot start with the one, you need to do it all parallel, because as soon as you start putting the river in the center and people see the river, they maybe also start to take care of it. And especially if they are the ones to have decided on what kind of elements to include in such a park. These rivers, as I said, they're very contaminated, and they all flow into one main river, which is called the Tarcoles River, which is the most contaminated, one of the most contaminated in Central America, the most of Costa Rica. And this one flows into the Gulf of Nicoya, and in that Gulf there's an island. It's the biggest inhabited island of Costa Rica, which is called Isla de Chira. This fisherwoman is from there. There's 3,000 people living there, and 90% of them are men and women. And so this fishing is a very important aspect of their economy. But also, especially a group of women, they started to become very worried about the situation of contamination. And they started mostly also for the health of their children and for the nature. And they started to collect all the solid waste that was showing up on the beaches. And there they asked for our help to design a recycling center. So again, we gave this as a task for a group of students that we were giving a course at that moment, a multidisciplinary course, where we took them to the island so they could get to know the women and their families. And it was really a surprise for them, because they really saw, it was actually not many people know this island, and they really saw the big amount of necessities that there are. These women often have small children, which they would bring to work. So there was a need for an area of keeping the children safe and where they could play. The community needed a place to meet as well. Like there's no community center, so this recycling center could at the same time also function as a community center, a place to give environmental education or to receive tourists, to also add value to these recyclables, not only bring the plastic and the paper to the mainland, but also add value to it and be able to sell it for a higher amount, like you see here, which is the jewelry that they make of the closing clips of cans, and together with cloth. And like that, they can generate an extra earning apart from the earnings from their fisheries. We also went back with the students to show the different proposals. There were 8 proposals made, and all the students groups made models so that the women could also really understand how it would look or how it could look. And they were able to have a communication between what they like of it, what they like less, and what they would change. And it was actually a sharing of knowledge and interests where both the students got to know a lot about how people live on the island, and the people on the island, they got to know about architecture. We brought this proposal, the final proposal that was afterwards also developed further through our foundation. We brought it to the Venice Biennale in 2016, together with 8 other rural acupuncturists, which we developed together with Prairie View A&M University from Houston. So apart from the Recycling and Community Center, we don't call it only a recycling center because it became bigger and it has a lot of functions. So we call it a Recycling and Community Center. There were also proposals for a floating restaurant or an artist in residence or an elderly daycare. There's so many needs on the island, actually. And this, why do we do that? Also to make it known, we did a big crowdfunding campaign to get the funds together to be able to construct the Recycling and Community Center. So we were able to put enough together to send the first boat to the island. We try to use as much material as there is on the island, but of course it's limited. So we also need to buy things on the mainland and ship it over, which has an extra cost, and it's also a whole logistic issue. But we managed to send the first ship over, and with workers from the island, the first phase of the center was constructed, like in what we call an assisted self-construction. And here you see them looking at the computer because the engineer couldn't go to the island, and they were like discussing certain elements from the construction. And it's very interesting to hear also from the workers that they really also learned new techniques of construction, which they can then also use for their own houses, or even as a job. Some maybe some are working much more as a carpenter now than before, or a constructor. All the different ideas for the community recycling and community center, we also included in what we call a toolkit of recycling and community centers, which could be applied all over Costa Rica. And again, it has these elements which we always try to work with, that it's multifunctional, that it has different uses throughout the day, for different groups of people on the island: youth, elderly people, the community as a whole, the women that do the recycling process, etc. We also included elements of passive bioclimatic architecture, shading, the ventilation, like natural ventilation, capturing of rainwater to use for outside irrigation in a vegetable garden, and also making sure that there's no liquid waste going into the sea. And so it's really this combination of elements, which also adds issues like it helps the local economy. It helps also to improve the health of the people through more healthy food with the vegetable garden. So it has a lot of different elements as well, which also made that we won an honorable mention of the Buckminster Fuller Institute. As they said, the center systematically addresses multiple immediate needs of the community. Sorry, here's something in the way. Presenting an integral strategy to improve well-being and meet resource needs. And again, this integral strategy is really central to the way we work. Also in this last project that I want to present, and then before giving it over to Oliver, which was done in Kuridabat, which again we used actually methodologies of participatory design. And so these were neighborhood improvement projects in different neighborhoods of Kuridabat, where we worked with the neighbors, the citizens of those neighborhoods, and also with, again, with the different sectors of the population and more elderly people, youth, even the children, because we also think it's important to take into account how they see their urban surrounding, how they use their neighborhood or what they are missing in the neighborhood. We've also went again for this social cultural mapping. We went on walks through the neighborhood together with the neighbors of those different areas, and together we developed different ideas of urban acupunctures, as we call them. We also call them sweet tools, because by now this city of Kuridabat is known as the sweet city, because there's a whole idea of bringing nature back into the city to attract pollinizers, and even also seeing these pollinizers as part of the citizens. And so we worked a lot with green elements, nature elements, green walls, facades, green roofs for shading, again, areas for recreation, for getting together. As I always say, like, public space is so important to strengthen the social integration in a neighborhood, because that is where the people come together, and that is where you come together from different classes, from different ethnicities, from different ages. Only in public space do you see this melting pot of different people from the city. So that's very important for social cohesion of a neighborhood as well. There was also areas for food trucks. So also, again, local economy was strengthened, and areas for running. So also to live a healthy life, sports, cycling, etc. Specific areas for children as well. All these plans, all these individual proposals, they were brought together in a bigger master plan for 3 neighborhoods that we were working with, and also to strengthen this integration between different neighborhoods of one city. Very interesting and very important also is that this project got various awards. Amongst others, it was called one of the inspiring practices of the new urban agenda during the Habitat 3 conference, which is held every 10 years. And the last one was in Quito in Ecuador in 2016. And it also was called, or it won the award of Wellbeing City in 2020, where it actually won next to world-known cities with really high budgets, which Kuridabat is not, like New York, Buenos Aires, Bordeaux, and Curitiba. Now I go out and Oliver goes in with a film of this sweet city. So I stop sharing.
All right, let's see how we make the transition. Should work well. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Let's see if the audio was shared as well. I think not. I'll do it again. There we go.
Yeah.
Great. So as Marije was saying, here's a little clip, which is with the current mayor of Curitiba. And it's also interesting to say that he's already the third mayor, consecutive mayor who's working on this program, which is something rather unusual for Latin American cities. You could say that like there is this kind of political continuity to carry a project through the time.
Los proyectos de Ciudad Dulce marcan muchas acciones relativas a poner en el centro de la obra pública y de la política pública cantonal a la naturaleza y a los animales también que conviven con nosotros en la ciudad. Todos los espacios públicos se les aplica un diseño basado en la visión de Ciudad Dulce. Ese diseño en muchas ocasiones es un diseño elaborado también en conjunto con los ciudadanos.
Realmente cuando nosotros hicimos esta visión, nos preguntamos cómo podíamos agregar valor al planeta en lugar de sustraer valor del planeta. Y para hacer eso sabíamos que la única forma posible era poniendo la naturaleza y la biodiversidad en el centro de todo lo que nosotros fuéramos a hacer.
El jardín colgante, una obra pensada básicamente para quitarle un poco el gris a este parque y configurarlo un poco más basado en nuestros conceptos de cercanía con la naturaleza. Por otro lado, también tenemos el proyecto del vivero municipal.
Tenemos jardines que llamamos aceras dulces que también funcionan como jardines de lluvia, que ayuda a filtrar el agua y que vuelva a los pozos de agua donde vamos a poder volver a regenerar agua, cultivar agua. Tenemos una estación polinizadora, un poco para ayudarle a los polinizadores, ¿verdad? Que tengan más espacios para anidar, para reproducirse. Tenemos también en muchos lugares ya en Curitiba iluminación a base de energía solar. En realidad yo creo que lo más importante de todo esto es haber planteado no un para la ciudad.
It's getting stuck a bit, Oliver.
El contacto con la naturaleza es un factor determinante en el bienestar y la felicidad. Nosotros que los posibles servicios que podemos ofrecer a nuestros ciudadanos son servicios ecosistémicos. Si ya hay municipalidades que estamos haciendo esto, quiere decir que se puede hacer.
And this video we actually did in the context of a more recent project where we collaborated with the Ministry of the Environment here in Costa Rica and with the SINAC, that's the System for the Conservation of Natural Areas. And that project was backed up by the GIZ, that's the Corporation for International Cooperation from Germany, and they had a financing from the Ministry of the Environment in Germany. So that was very interesting for us to also see how you bring these different actors together in order to create a project and to maintain a project. And obviously the exchange between Costa Rica and Germany, that is very valuable for both ends, because you can learn a lot from the other. And this project from the GIZ that was embedded in a framework called Biodiversity. And basically within this framework, we created this toolbox and a manual of nature-based solutions for urban Costa Rica. And Curitiba is also working with a lot of these nature-based solutions, like Irene and like Jimmy was also describing it in the clip. And for us, it was very interesting to see or think how through these nature-based solutions, you can create a new type of city that basically looks for a new kind of cohesion with the environment and also uses this as a tool to strengthen the coexistence among the inhabitants. And with that concept in mind, like we created this first set of manuals of different nature-based solutions. There's a first set of 24, which also have gone into an online catalog. And there's also a physical representation. And basically all of these manuals tell the street, tell the neighborhood, tell the city how you can basically implement nature-based solutions in the field. So there's these different scales that we've been working on, house, street, neighborhood, city, and interurban condition. And like that, we create a very interesting and very vivid kind of toolbox of knowledge, if you want to put it like that. Literally, I mean, I have a toolbox here also in front of me. So it becomes this kind of, box of knowledge. And then like with the different folders, as you also see it over here, people can go in the field, look for their experts. There's also a ecosystemic value wheel so that you do understand what kind of value you create through this intervention. And it can be implemented individually, it can be implemented in a group. And once again, it can also become a very important tool to support people living together in the neighborhood or in the city. And this kind of like, you know, participatory aspect, letting people take part of the intervention, letting people take part of also the whole creation of the idea, like working in a process of co-creation, that is really essential to our work. This here's a photo where we also applied the idea of a participatory design process in a place called La Fortuna, is one of the, or is considered the cradle of ecotourism in Costa Rica. It's a really beautiful area around a significant volcano called the Arenal volcano. And it's a beautiful area, but there's, as in all of Costa Rica, there's a lot of problem with road congestion. So we were contracted by the local Association for Integral Development. It's called ADI, the Asociación de Desarrollo Integral. And with them, together with the actors, the main actors, the most important actors from the area, with all the people who wanted to participate, we created these new kind of sections for streets, this new kind of mobility concept to really get the people in and around La Fortuna and create these different scenarios for inhabiting the street. Making streets for all within the urban center, creating the idea of shared streets, getting people through the streets safely, and then also create access paths between the different villages that are significant for the area. Create also a segregated bike lane for the high-speed traffic that goes through on a long distance in this area on the national road, and also create a path for the adventurers around the Arenal Lake, which enables or which promotes ecotourism in the area. So like this, we have created this kind of network of 60 kilometers overall, based on these different kind of road sections that I showed briefly. And we call this project La Fortuna en dos ruedas, La Fortuna on two wheels, because it really is like the idea to promote non-motorized transport, which in itself is also a nature-based solution to use the human body as a motor for moving ahead. And we have created this kind of network of paths around the volcano, connecting the different villages of significance, points of interest for the ecotourism industry. And on the right side in this graph, you see that we also connected to the Arenal Lake. And then you can basically make a whole round around this lake. So these kind of concepts for us are very significant because on the one hand side, they promote a new kind of urbanity. Also, you see that in the different projects we promote to reach different points of interest at short distance. In COVID times, we also talked a lot about the 15-minute city. So I think all these concepts are represented in what we have been working on, in the sense that, like, on the one hand side, we want to create a more quality kind of public space. And in the other side, we also want to reduce the necessity for motorized transport. That is a significant item in terms of lowering the environmental footprint or the ecological or even the carbon footprint of Costa Rica. And in 2010, we made a first approach of making a roadmap to decarbonization of the country as a whole. We did that together with OMA, the Office for Metropolitan Architecture, and its think tank, AMO, Advanced Media Operations, who had worked on a roadmap to lower carbon emissions in the European Union. So based on a dialogue with OMA and AMO, we had said, well, if we can significantly lower the footprint of the European Union, such an industrial giant in the world, it must be very easy to decarbonize a country like Costa Rica. It's not easy, but it's possible. And that is basically what this roadmap shows. And you see here on the one hand side, you see the turquoise representation of the physical footprint of the country, of the map, where you see that 52%, for example, at that time were produced, energy was produced by renewable energies or with renewable sources, and 48%, so almost half of the energy household had to be imported, was created through imported fossil fuel, which is used to power the motorized fleet. So these diagrams show us how important it really is to tackle the mobility issue in this country. And you see, like, with looking at the greater metropolitan area as a whole, proposing compact and multifunctional cities, like these are the kind of moments where we intend to lower carbon emissions at an urban, regional, and even national scale. So part of the roadmap is also like the proposal to maximize renewable energy production. And that is something very interesting that is already going on. Like over the last 8 years consecutively, Costa Rica has produced almost 99% of its entire energy household through renewables. And then the roadmap is also showing how you can gradually decarbonize the different contaminating sector. So we look at power creation, most of all, once again, transport, significant contributor to carbon emissions in Costa Rica. We also looked at industry, buildings, we'll get to the no footprint house in a sec, and agriculture and other sectors as the main contributors to the carbon footprint in Costa Rica. So the roadmap shows how to decarbonize gradually. The original plan, or what the roadmap as proposed with OMA and AMO had suggested, was to decarbonize until 2021, which would have been technically possible. But obviously, we're talking also about a very political project here and something that needs to be built up very solidly in order to be successful. So this took more time than planned, but on the one hand side, as said, like there was already a kind of increase in terms of renewable energy production, which is mostly hydroelectric in Costa Rica. And then the goal of the roadmap, as said, was to decarbonize the country from 2010 to 2021. Here, the major red area, which is the kind of peak of emissions you see in the center of the Costa Rican map, that's actually the Central Valley of Costa Rica, where the greater metropolitan area is located. So you probably understand through these graphs how important it is to tackle the hotspots in terms of mobility-related issues and other carbon emissioning sectors. And this is a kind of graphic representation of the plan as a whole. In the end, it was this gentleman here on the left, the former President Carlos Alvarado Quesada and his government, that finally ratified a roadmap in 2019, and it is now targeting decarbonization of Costa Rica up until 2050. The plan exists, it's in place, and we think that this is also a very important statement from the Costa Rican government to say that we want to decarbonize the country as a whole and also be a role model in that sense to other countries that might follow suit. These ideas, or the idea of the roadmap and the plan for decarbonization, was also represented at the pre-COP. The COP is the International Climate Change Conference by the United Nations. And there was a preliminary COP in Costa Rica in 2019, which was the 25th COP meeting. And then by the end of the year, there was a main meeting in Madrid where we also participated. On the one hand side, to speak about sustainable cities and the possibility of nature-based solutions in an urban context. And on the other hand side, we also presented this project here on the left, which is called the No Footprint House. And basically that responds to the idea of the decarbonization of Costa Rica as a whole. But for us, it was also very important to show like case study examples to say, well, what does it mean to decarbonize? Because many people think that it means or implies less life quality, that they cannot take any hot showers anymore, or they're not allowed to get around or something like that. So we also wanted to show that decarbonization can be beautiful and it can be sexy. So with that in mind, like we showed case studies like the No Footprint House to show what it actually means to live a decarbonized life. And the No Footprint House is basically a modular systemic design. There's different options for foundations, for the building mainframes. There's a double layered facades, and very importantly, so different proposals for the roof. Undoubtedly one of the most important building components here in the tropics. And we combine these main components with what we call the furniture plugs. So on the one hand side, there's like what we call a central service core, which sits in the middle of the first prototype that we built. And then we also have these additional facade plugs that you can locate in a double layered facade. So this gives a very interesting and very high level of versatility to create different configurations. And here's like some examples of these configurations. Obviously, speaking to potential clients and bringing this project forward, we also wanted to show what you can do with this design toolbox. And then these are 3 different configurations, building in different sizes that are responding to the typical typologies that are built in Costa Rica. And we started to look at this building here, which is the NFH 108, as a first typology that we wanted to build. And you see in these diagrammatic representations that there's this kind of idea of opening the building up towards the outside, and really also create this kind of synergy between inside and outside spaces, which is such a beautiful design feature and such a beautiful quality for architecture in the tropics. And then in order to do this kind of opening, we created this facade mechanism. Already before, I was talking about the double layered facades. So on the one hand side, we have the vertical structural column, which is represented on the left here in the sketch. And then we have this inclined outer facade, which basically helps us to reduce the direct impact of sunlight, heat, solar stress, solar gains, and precipitation, rainfalls in the actual floor plan of the building. And by incorporating these mechanisms, these kind of counterweighted pull-up mechanisms in the facade, we were able to lift entire sections open of the building in order to create this feeling of living inside out at any moment that the client wishes to do so. And specifically, this mechanism was a bigger nut to crack. I mean, the building is based also on the idea of prefabrication. So we prefabricated the prototype in the Central Valley, which is also the center of all industries here in Costa Rica. And then here you see one of the first prototypes of this bifold gate that is such an important and significant part of the building design as a whole. Once this was resolved, we basically put the whole house on a 40-foot trailer. And here in the back, you also see the central service core that sits in the center of the building. And we brought it overnight to its target location, which is located in the southwest of Costa Rica along the Pacific coast. So then, based on the pre-established foundations, we set the central service core onto the foundations, and we basically built the building all around it. And the central service core is plugged into the local grid structure, so it feeds into the local water system and the local electricity system. We basically decided to connect the building to the local grid because there's such a high percentage of this grid being fed by renewables in Costa Rica. So, you know, like compared to importing solar panels and put them in a house, overall, it was much more sustainable to say, no, the overall grid is sustainable. So of course, we plug it into there. And once the building was finished, this is basically a central view onto the main facade. You see the central service core sitting in the middle of the building. You see 2 sleeping rooms in the back of the core. This is a 2-bedroom typology with an LDK towards the front and a sandwich terrace in the back. And this is an overall square meter size of 150 meters of built space. And you see how parts of the facade can open up. And in this section, you can also see what the building is really based on. It is based on using locally also the power of the sun. What we do basically is to heat water with a thermosolar system, because that can consume a lot of electricity if you take that from the grid. So that we heat locally. We also recollect some of the rainwater to use it in the gardening and in the gray water areas of the house. And very importantly, so the whole building is based on the principle of natural ventilation. Here you have a close-up of the facade section. On the left, you also see how the counter mechanisms are situated within this double-layered facade. And here also, to get an idea of the scale, you see how a person can inhabit this space, and you see part of the facade sections being open. This is an overview of the building and its context and its natural environment. And here on the right side, that's also a very important feature of the design. You see that the sleeping rooms, while the main areas or the social areas remain open or can be open completely, the sleeping and private areas, which is what we call the cocoons, are protected by glass sliding doors and curtains to create acoustic protection and visual protection on the ground level. And then in the upper section of the building, what you see there, these are mosquito nettings, which are also mounted in the back of the outer facades that you see in this photo to prevent insects from coming in. And here in this photo, you also see on the right in the back there, two of these furniture plugs. Basically, this client chose to have one which situates the bed, so you can relax and lay back in the niche of the bed. And towards the front, you see a so-called closet plug, which was what these clients chose for the configuration of the building. As said, the social area can be opened up completely, and the environment where this project is built in also allows for that in terms of like still living well, in terms of not being eaten up by insects. So for actually most of the year, the building works also without the mosquito netting, but we still put them in the private space. We're now building also in more humid areas where the whole facades are also protected through mosquito netting. So it is also interesting to see that you can adapt the layers of the building to respond to local site conditions. I want to show also a short video about the inhabitation process of the house with actually the original clients. And then I'm going to give you a short preview about what is going on and how we continue this project in the present time, and then how we want to bring it in the future as well. So this basically gives you an idea about a day of life in this no footprint house. And for us, it was also very important to focus on the user, right? Like Marije was speaking before about the relationship of hardware and software in our work. And like it's really not about the object, but it's about the subject inhabiting such a place. And I quickly want to say that, like, for us, this was a unexpectedly and amazingly successful project. We won 28 awards worldwide, which obviously is amazing for such a small kind of building. But we understand that it was also this bigger idea behind the project that really brought us this kind of recognition, that it also responds to an idea at national scale, that it responds to the idea and the possibility of multiplication and reproduction. And that is basically what we've been working on since. So what is next? On the one hand side, we're looking into building up this no footprint community. We have 15 buildings now of this principle that are either under construction or in the planning pipeline. And for us, it was also very interesting to see how do we define decarbonization. Because at the beginning, with the first prototype, you see it's built with a steel frame, with a steel structure. Steel still needs to be imported in Costa Rica. Basically, what we wanted to show is what the available materials at its time, like what can we do through design in order to significantly lower the carbon footprint of a building. And we did a life cycle assessment of the prototype as built. And we saw that the first one, the 1.0, saved 40% of carbon emissions in comparison to a base case. A base case being like a regular building, how it's typically constructed at that time in Costa Rica. And then we used this information and the success of the project to get in touch with the building industry. And we were looking for partners. So one of the partners that we found is a Swiss-Costa Rican company called Novelty. And we got them interested in producing all the components, producing all these toolbox that we need for our buildings in a laminated teak wood base. So this is a material now that is entirely grown, produced, and available in Costa Rica, which obviously is very important for the further development of our project. On the one hand side, this gives us diversity and more possibilities of configuration to deal with our clients. And it gives the clients the possibility to also basically choose the level of decarbonization that they look for. Because, you know, some people say, well, it's beautiful, but I don't have so much money, so I only want to decarbonize a little. But our philosophy is like, even if you only decarbonize half of what is possible, it still is a saving. And then we found this client from the Netherlands who bought an amazing site above a place called Rica. And with this client together, we basically developed the configuration that they wanted to do. So on the one hand side, we're reproducing the initial pre-designed typologies. And then on the other side, we're also doing completely customized design. And with these people above Ovita, we basically created this project, which is a 2-story structure, a no footprint house built entirely in wood. And this gives space. It's a big house, but it's also a big family. They have 6 children together, so that's a family of 8. Yeah, they were very productive. And so like this, we have the opportunity now to, on the one hand side, create different material configurations, and on the other hand side, also create different building configurations and sizes. And this building is actually 80% decarbonized, and that's the maximum we can do at this point. Like these last 20%, we cannot eliminate what is possible in terms of building technology in Costa Rica, but we can compensate these last 20%. And that is something very interesting to take into account as well, because through the production of energy locally, or also through reforestation, we can compensate these remaining 20% and thus become carbon neutral or even carbon positive, according to what the client wishes to do. And for us, it's also very important to have these partners in our projects. Obviously, as said, all this is based on a team approach, or what we call a multi-stakeholder approach. So entities like Novelty, or for example, the Green Lab, that's a French company with whom we're now collaborating to create hempcrete panels that we're going to use in some upcoming projects. These are very important allies for us in order to do the architecture that we think is good to do and that our clients think is the right thing to do. And then we also collaborate with a group which is called Costa Rica Regenerativa. That is a very interesting entity because they promote regenerative development in Costa Rica. So the philosophy is to regenerate first and then take sustainability from there. And together with Costa Rica Regenerativa, we have started to work on a couple of projects. And basically in collaboration with Costa Rica Regenerativa and a university here called the Universidad Latina, we also started a regenerative architecture workshop, which on the one hand side looks into architectures that respond to the principles of regeneration. And we also invite students and universities from other countries to come work with us, come talk with us about sustainability or regeneration. So being here with all of you, I think that is also an open call. Please come, organize yourselves, come to Costa Rica, and let's have an online or on-site, much rather, session here in Costa Rica if you can. And these factors is basically what responds to our philosophy in the office. Steffen was briefly pointing it out at the beginning in his brief introduction, that like we target what we call integral sustainability. And I mean, of course, like everybody has a kind of peculiar philosophy of what sustainability means, what it is. For us, in terms of applying sustainability in our projects, we talk about integral sustainability, where we take into account factors that respond to the environment, protecting the environment. Obviously, we need to create or respect an economy with what we do. Like, for example, with the novelty profiles, we create a new kind of building economy or green product economy with products that had not been on the market yet, but that are urgently needed. And then in our projects, it's also very important to look at equality. That means to make projects accessible to different parts of the population. You've seen that through the participatory design processes, we reach out to the population and the future users of these projects that we're working on together with the local populations. And I would say that these three columns of sustainability respond also more to the original concept of sustainability as it's also represented in the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. And for us, it's also very important to include the dimension of engineering in our work. That means, how can you implement these classic pillars of sustainability in the field? How can you create a built environment that is basically looking at these different factors of integral sustainability? And that's, yeah, I mean, you could call it a formula that we apply in our work. We also talk about the 4 E's in the sense of these factors being applied. And that is basically where we would like to leave it for now. And if you want to see more about our work, here's the direction of the website. From there, you can also go into the different social media channels where we're active. And yeah, that's it for now. Steffen, thank you so much for giving us this space. And I hope that we still have a vivid round of discussion now.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Marije and Oliver. Great graphics, great video, great argumentation. Very, very good. We have also a couple of interesting questions here that I want to come to in a second. I love Costa Rica, as you know, and I'm active there myself. But when you showed me the sprawling San Jose, you know, the immense suburban sprawl and the efficient colonial supercuadras, the grid is dissolving, you know, it's getting lost forever. It's terrible. It needs, of course, on one level, building solutions, but it also needs urban solutions, looking at the big picture here. And I love what you do in practice, in research, in teaching, in all 3 domains. You're busy, you're active in all 3 domains. You're actually walking the talk, and you're doing demonstration projects. And, you know, you talked about regreening, renaturing the city, which is fantastic in Costa Rica because of the immense biodiversity that can be brought back, you know, not just the flowers and plants and trees that grow by themselves magnificently, but also the butterflies, the birds, and other things. So it's great, you know, and then, of course, coming to your main demonstration project, that amazing no footprint house that not just is sustainable, but it also is elegant and beautiful and affordable, I understand, you know, and now you have 15 houses in the pipeline under construction, you know, and I think that those things are very important. 40% lower footprint than conventional construction, and then 80% the next step, significant achievement. So very, very well done, I must say. And, you know, you're very aware of the public environmental dimension of architecture, but also the building's impact goes far beyond just the user. It's not just the user group who lives there in a project like that, but also people that come and learn and visit and find out about it. So the impact of such projects is amazing. And I mean, you will agree, in architecture, we rely on the process of collaboration. You are very much a collaborating team, you know, and it's interesting, Marije, you are actually not an architect. You said you're an anthropologist, or what's your background, your discipline, Marije? Marije, what's your discipline? Oh, I think you're muted, Oliver.
Yeah, Marije seemed a bit frozen there. I think she has connection difficulties in Suriname. Marije is an anthropologist. She has a master in anthropology and her bachelor in economy. So I think that is a kind of interesting mix by itself.
Yeah, very good combination. And a large complex architecture operation of any sort requires an enormous group of people to work with. You need clients to pay for it. You need authorities to approve it. You need engineering consultants to contribute their knowledge to it. You need contractors to build it. And you could also need citizens. You also should need citizens to be engaged in the process of a project as well, you know. And it's always finding convincing methods of participation of citizens. You spoke about that. It's not easy, citizen engagement and participatory models, you know, and the profession has to be very focused on that going forward, I believe. And as an architect, you do this very much. You find yourself promoting your product, your vision, and inevitably you're through that. It often comes to an exhausting point, because you're trying to identify suitable ideas and you are trying to make ideas relevant to others, you know, that they want also. And somehow you push something which doesn't yet exist. It doesn't yet exist. And you have to persuade a huge amount of people about how good it might be. You know, that could be to some point very exhausting. And for some reason, I found people don't trust architects, you know. They don't always trust. You have to do a lot of convincing there. And so coming now to the questions, we have the first question here. We have a couple of questions from Bijan, who is also with us. Hi, Bijan. Thank you for asking those questions. And Bijan is working on a modular offsite construction system right now that he wants to implement in the desert here, in the Mojave Desert. And so he asks, do you have an idea how far away from the factory this house can be built before it's not feasible or sustainable for the energy of transport? Because you're going to have to transport it quite far sometimes. And when does it become a problem that the transport miles and the footprint of the house is actually lost because of the long transport? Could you talk to that?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. And also thank you for this summary, because I love the way you put things together and the way you put them into perspective. Responding to the specific question, I mean, here in Costa Rica, it's a small country. So if we prefabricate in the Central Valley, then maybe the longest route we can take is like 5 to maybe 6 hours. That's already like South Caribbean, I would say. So within that framework, if you also think, let's say, about Costa Rica as this laboratory of sustainability, the way we see it, then the project is legit within this context. Of course, if you're looking at a country like the United States, which is so much bigger, and I mean, we know all the prefabrication concepts that swept into the country in the 20th century, none of them were really ever so successful. And I think that also has to do with the size of the country. So for us, it's also about creating, like, you know, centers of production and distribution points. So on the one hand side, when we look at the first prototype, I said we did that here in the Central Valley, and the shipping time to Ojochal, where it is built, was like 4.5 hours. And the wood components that you saw in the second project that I showed today, they're being produced in the north of Costa Rica in an area called Guanacaste, because that is a very good area for teak to grow. So there we have another production scheme where the wood elements are actually assembled in Guanacaste, and then from there they are brought to the different locations where we want to build. And that is very important also to note, like, you know, when we work more locally, which we try as much as possible to still incorporate local materials, also here in Costa Rica. But we also have to create a critical mass in order to justify like the installation of a prefabrication installation. So that is a kind of mix where we take a bit of both worlds.
Yeah, and it's such an important aspect, the transport. Like now we are trying to do a CLT project here in Las Vegas, but the panel manufacturers are all up in Oregon or Canada, you know, so it's a long way to truck the panels from Seattle, from Oregon, from the forests, from the sawmill manufacturing of panels all the way down on trucks to Las Vegas or to San Diego. That's a long way. And so that is creating quite an impact, as you say, because the US is such a big place. In Australia, which is equally a big continent, it's easier because all the cities are along the eastern board, you know, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, where most of the population and CLT projects are happening. Engineered timber happening is all around there. It's not too bad. You can drive within 5-6 hours from one city to the other. But there are a couple of other questions from Bijan. You can all read. Bijan, do you want to read? Maybe you want to talk to the second question. What measurements when you talk about the grid?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate your response. The reason I asked was I was able to tour a factory in Amsterdam over the winter break that was doing a similar idea. And they were talking about that about past 500 kilometers, it became like that point where it's not really, that loses the integrity of the project. So with everything grown locally, and obviously Costa Rica is in a small strip, you know, versus Netherlands connected to, you know, more cities, but I appreciate your response. My other questions were about the grid. I pulled up your Arc Daily write-up, and it talked about a 12 by 9 meter grid. And I was thinking about the base foundation and that grid. And I was kind of wondering what informed that grid. I see a perfect square. So maybe you can tell me about the 12 by 9. I kind of got lost as far as the 12 by 9. And was this based on standardized measurements? You know, every country kind of has in America, it's 4 by 8, which is kind of a standardized components. I was just wondering if your grid was based on something that is unique to Central America as far as construction process, or if it was just something you decided was good enough space for the human functions.
Yeah, also great question. Thank you for that. It's a bit of both also here, because on the one hand side, it's funny, but like the first project that Marije and I did was to work on a relocation of a village population in Nicaragua. That was before we started A01. That was actually like for us a way to see, can we work together? And if so, what would we do together? So back then we had worked with this village population where Marije was working with the people to see what they need for their living, for their lives. And based on that, we defined a prototypical productive and progressive house, meaning that progressive, it can grow, you can add spaces, and productive in the sense that this was in a rural area and people needed to include productive areas to make their living. Funnily enough, like the prototype that came out of this process was 6 by 6, and it was subdivided into this succession of 2 spaces of 3 by 3 each, and 1 bigger room, the living kitchen area of 6 by 3. So from that moment on, we have seen in different areas like this 3 by 3 reoccurrence, which became a kind of almost like a golden measure in Central America. And we kind of saw that it really fits a lot of spaces. So, you know, putting in a bed, getting around the bed, putting in a table, sitting around the table, etc. Like it was a very interesting measure that we have dealt with in different projects on residential scale. We now do projects in a 3 by 3 meter grid and in a 4 by 4 meter grid. That comes with the fact that, like, for example, you see in a no footprint house, and you also set the NFH 108 that is 9 by 12 meter in the central grid area for the foundations, and then it cantilevers 50 centimeter out to each side to also support this kind of appearance of a floating object. And so in fact, the floor plan is 13 by 10 meters, and from there the facades incline outwards. And then the roof overhangs that are not built floor plan in Costa Rica are calculated at 50%, which actually gives this NFH 108 a total square meter size of 150 square meter. And we worked there in a 3x3 meter grid because we also knew that we have this additional space through the overhang and through the incline outer facades, which overall gives it a much more spacious appearance compared to having closed facades or even having vertical facades with a window, like in a typical building. So that was interesting for us, where we could see that we can maintain this 3x3 logic, and it was fitting indeed all the rooms that we had in the pre-designed typologies. And also later when we did the wood house, for example, the wood house has not one central core, but it is designed with a dual core, so to say. So you have like two cores that go up to the second level, and they both carry staircases to get up to that second level. And like this, we start reconfiguring the different buildings based on the 3x3 meter grid. What is also an interesting fact is that in Costa Rica, 6 meter is a kind of important number for anything related to construction, because if you buy profiles, if you buy steel profiles on the market, they come in a 6 meter length. And with that being said, like also the small trucks are based on a 6 meter, how do you call that, platform in the back, so that they can transport these items. I mean, we in the end, we put the whole house on 140 feet trailer, so it was not so relevant in that sense. But if you have smaller buildings, like for example, the NFH 36, we can put on a 6 meter long truck. And in that sense, it becomes a very important dimension in itself. So on the one hand side, again, hardware, software, the kind of social way of inhabiting spaces responds very well to the 3x3. And in terms of the market, the hardware, in terms of materials being available, it also responds very well to the multiplication of 3.
Very interesting for us at the moment, because we're trying to crack the optimum grid. Bijan has developed an amazing modular system already with all the joints and everything, and it keeps changing. You want to stop sharing your screen maybe, then we can talk better? Yeah. Thanks, Oliver. Yeah, any other questions? I see here is our friend Rick van Dieben, great friend of the university. Rick, how are you? Rick, you have some Dutch heritage like Marije. Hello, Rick. We can't see you yet. Hey, how are you?
Hi, Stefan.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming online.
Good to see you. I heard the Dutch accents, and I've absolutely loved this conversation. It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to ask anything? Have any questions to the architects?
No, I kind of joined a little late. However, you know, I absolutely love the low tech approach to the solar control as well. Just having counterweights and not you know, getting into the sort of finicky mechanization that kind of, you know, in my experience has kind of like killed some of the nice detailing on a project, because now it's got a machine and it has to be, you know, maintained and all that kind of stuff. So no, I just really love the project. I just love how much the team has integrated, you know, global perspective research into, you know, zero energy buildings and how that affects, you know, the climate in general. So architects definitely need to be more involved in the, you know, in the climate mitigation and climate planning discussion at the city and, you know, national level even.
Yeah, great point.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Thanks a lot, Rick. I mean, it's fantastic. Bijan, do you have any follow-up question?
No,
maybe
I
also
appreciate
important. Maybe
ahead.
also important to say that I'm not an architect, but I'm an anthropologist. So of course we also have this social focus in our work together.
Well, that's an important point, but also, I mean, like really, before we started A01, Marije was working for the United Nations. She was working for IFAD, that's the International Funds for Agricultural Development. I was working with OMA, so obviously I was in a completely different world in the sense of building high-end architectures all over the world. But obviously OMA and specifically REM also for me has a very kind of anthropological approach towards living in the city, or more recently also in the countryside. And I think that is also an important thing to understand in terms of understanding our work with ASIO1. Marije comes from an institutional background, has a very interesting kind of approach towards international cooperation. Me as an architect urbanist, I'm more used to also finding clients, let's say, through competitions, through advertising. And I think like by joining forces, we found a very kind of interesting way of creating projects, which is also reflected in the setup of our office, that we have a company and we have a foundation. So we don't always need to follow the market. We can also impulse certain topics that maybe don't have a market yet. And on the other hand side, we also have this kind of possibility of a think tank kind of creation with it. Which for me was also obviously very inspirational in the time of being with OMA. And at the time I was there, we created also AMO as a counterpart to the actual architecture office and practice. And this was a very significant split. I mean, we did that back then when we worked on the Prada shops. These projects might be familiar to some of you, where on the one hand side, it was about building a physical representation of the Prada brand in different cities in the United States. And on the other side, there was also the topic of creating the virtual representation of the Prada brand in the fashion shows, in media campaigns, etc. So I found that very interesting because really architecture was going beyond the physical realm for me at that time. And obviously Rem was also researching with the project on the city in Harvard. He was researching metropolitan conditions worldwide, also in developing countries, like Lagos, like the Shenzhen Delta. And I think this kind of influenced a lot also what we are doing today. But it is from my point of view, very innovative mix in terms of bringing this international cooperation and institutional approach together with what we might be trained to do as architects and urbanists.
Did you ever have a chance to show Rem the non-footprint house? Or not?
House not, but we did the National Pavilion of Costa Rica in the 2014 Biennale that was directed by Rem. And I mean, it was about the conversations with Rem also to talk about this roadmap and then also to represent Costa Rica in the Biennale as something that Costa Rica had never done before. So this was a completely abstract, once again, that we were meeting, like you were also saying before, Stefan, like, how do you innovate, right? Like, how do you make something new? It can be a very long-lasting process, but it also is a very satisfying process because you put things on the agenda. You put things on the agenda here, what it means to show Costa Rica at the Biennale, and then to show what the urban culture is here in a place like Venice. Obviously, that was an amazing challenge, but also very satisfying experience for us.
Yeah, fantastic achievement, and not easily done, those things. You make it look easy. What I like about A01 is you make it all look as if it would be easy. And
well, maybe then
easy. Nothing comes easy, as we know, and always ignore the market. If you just work what the market asks you for, you never move forward. You never innovate. You just serve the market. You're just a consumer and never an innovator. But fantastic. So any other questions of anybody? Now is the moment. You can, Marije, you want to add anything? Or sorry, Oliver?
Yeah, maybe I can still add one thing. Totally agree with what you say. And you need to fail also, right? You need to create the space for you to fail. Because if you prototype, if you innovate, there's never like the first thing works. I mean, we failed a lot. So maybe the next lecture we should do about the failed projects or something like that. But it is really important, like, to have that space for yourself, right? And not be afraid, like, oh my God, like the client pressures and this and that. Like, it's really important to create a space for yourself where you can be innovative and have that time and have that space to explore.
I would love a lecture about failures. Failures and how to survive and how to move on. Very good. Anybody who wants to have any more comments? Rick, you're back. Did you want to say something? No? Okay. Marije, did you want to add anything? Marije?
No, I think we said a lot and we can keep on talking the whole evening for me. It's 7:30 here. But yeah, it's always very nice to be sharing experiences. So thank you very much for offering this platform and for us to participate in it.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for coming online and for spending time and telling us about. We very much appreciate. It's been very, very interesting. And at the moment, we are a little bit slow in putting it up online, but we will have the video online before Christmas, hopefully before Easter. And so we are having already 5 waiting to be put online. And so it's getting very interesting because it is really a teaching resource where students can go back and look into more in detail into those lectures where we had Winnie Maas recently from MVRDV and so on. We have, so you're not the first Dutch person, but it's been fantastic. Bijan,
I wanted to ask one more question. Oscar, at the very end of your presentation, you mentioned that there was a workshop in Costa Rica. I was hoping you might expand on that. I couldn't find it on your website, and I'm very much intrigued about that.
Yeah, it's called the Regenerative Architecture Workshop. We actually just started it with the Universidad Latina in Costa Rica Regenerativa, so there's no official documentation yet. But we had a first set of case studies that we were working on, that we started to work on this year. So we're looking at the application of regeneration principles in the field. And there is a bioregional hub for the implementation of regeneration principles in the La Fortuna area, where we also have this project of La Fortuna en Dos Ruedas, which is called Rancho Margot. And that is kind of an implementation of these principles in the context of the built environment. That is also where the launching took place of Costa Rica Regenerativa. And we're now working on a hub in the northwest in Guanacaste because it's such a different climate. It's dry forest at the coast. La Fortuna is much more lush tropical landscape. So the idea is to show in these 2 very different contexts, climatic contexts, to show how regeneration could work. And within that context, with the Regenerative Architecture Workshop, we also want to show how to build. And that is basically the idea behind that project.
And can other people participate if they're interested over summer?
Absolutely. I mean, we haven't officially started a summer school yet, but I think it's something we discussed, and I think it will come. I'm quite sure it will come. So far, it's embedded in the semestral work of the university and the students over here. But there's definitely an idea to create apertures for people from abroad, because we also see there's this kind of need and also this kind of hunger for exchange.
Fantastic.
Maybe if you have specific time frames and people who want to come, send the data and we'll work it around that, because last year the University from Amsterdam, the Bau Academy, was also over here, and we went with them to the island of Chira where we do this recycling project, and that was also a very nice kind of exchange to talk about what is the possibility of sustainable development, what is the possibility of a regenerative architecture, and I feel that this is growing in a very interesting and actually in a global scale.
I was hoping to bring a group of students from Las Vegas to Tamarindo and to work on projects there, which is such a fantastic place. Anyway, okay, fun, great to see you and to hear about very exciting work. And thank you everybody for connecting today. And well done. We are very impressed. And I hope we can welcome you in person in Vegas here at the School of Architecture. We're the only School of Architecture in Nevada, and the only accredited school here. So hopefully at some point you can come and visit us. Vegas is a very interesting body to work on, you know, urbanistically. It's a very unique place, as you know, and a lot of groups from Yale, from Harvard, and so on have come here always and do studies here. And so since 1972, Robert Venturi and Dennis Scott Brown published the Learning from Las Vegas book, and they started coming here in 1968 regularly and had studios here, and they really put it on the map as a urban laboratory, you know, that is worthwhile investigating. Robert Venturi always said, from Vegas you can learn as much as from Athens or Rome, you know, from the old city of Rome. You cannot learn anything more than from Las Vegas. So hopefully we can welcome you here. And in this sense, all the best and have a great weekend. Bye-bye. And thank you so much.
Sounds great, Stefan. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.